Dr. Chu, so I actually had a really interesting question for today's podcast, and it is if a fifth or sixth grader could talk, would it beg for help or remain silent as the disorder takes hold? What are your thoughts?
A disorder. What kind of disorder are we talking about?
Well, I just think there's so many disorders, especially at that tender age. But I
Hmm.
think the one that affects them the most would be eating disorders, not sleeping,
Hmm.
anorexia, purging, things related to their nutritional and growth and development, really.
Hmm. So, first of all, you are not a fifth and sixth grader, nor am I. So we need to preface this that we don't have the answers. We can simply look at the data and look at what's been going on and attempt to address this as a conversation. Well, right? When we have a conversation, we can then see if there's anything to be evolved from the conversation. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
But I
We
also
really don't have the answers. I mean, I can tell you that losing weight and not eating in some aspect of it is actually encouraged.
encouraged,
Oh yeah, very much.
really.
Yeah.
But I feel like
I,
it's so important that they do eat a lot because they're they're going through puberty, and when they go through
hmm.
puberty, they get their adult body, and that's there for the rest of their life.
Oh yes, it is. But it's encouraged by certain individuals in the school system to actually restrict their diets.
Hmm.
Yeah, restrictive dieting is encouraged, for example, by a coach, right? So, for example, if they're going to be in sports and they need to meet a certain weight class, for example, wrestling or martial arts, right? Their coach or master may tell them to maintain or cut their weight so that they can result in early exposure to dieting and calorie restriction, especially close to competitions.
Hmm.
All right. And for others, it may be for like figure skating, gymnastics, and ballet. Maintaining that certain aesthetic standard is encouraged and supported by coaches and even the institution in those fields. Right. And
But
then, right.
But
And
I feel like
then,
it's not, it shouldn't be, especially at that age,
hmm,
that lifting weights against stunt height or cutting
hmm,
weight, not eating, especially
yeah,
at that age. Like, I don't think it even matters for your dumb ballerina class or your wrestling, right?
you want to call it a dumb ballerina class, but this individual may be striving to become one of the foremost ballerinas out there. So, or a figure skater, right? Which starts very early and they're investing and they really want to do this and they're in those competitions and the crowd and the whole effect. I mean, you want to call it dumb?
Uh,
I mean, it's everything they have. Every afternoon they've been working on this. And right. So so what
yeah.
should we do? Right. And also modeling. I mean, you see America's Got Talent and other ones where there's child models, adolescent models that
Mhm.
they got this gig and they're entering into Hollywood and it could change their whole life because it could put them into stardom and transform them completely.
Mhm.
Yeah. So so the pressure's on, right? I don't think you expected me to respond this way,
No,
right?
I did.
Yeah, right. So that's why it's entertaining, right? Because sometimes there are serious exceptions, right? And rightfully so. And then there's also religious and cultural practices where, for example, Ramadan, they are going to that's not usually required for young children, but some pre-adolescents choose to participate. And then in Christian traditions, there's Lent, and some families encourage dietary restrictions during that period to observe, the religious views. And then even in some like South Asian or even African cultures, children are subjected to dietary practices to achieve specific body ideals for aesthetic or perceived health benefits. And then on top of all of that, in a highly competitive industry where you're being cast for ET or something, right? You those child actors, not only are they like they got to look a certain part, but they got to look at certain appearance, and then we don't want to leave out allergies and obesity issues where a doctor may prescribe it because they're just having they view that despite the developmental needs, they're going to promote that restriction. And then the parents might look at that as, oh, yeah, they have a type 1 child with a type 1 diabetes or even a metabolic disorder. So they're prescribed a restricted diet. So there's a lot going on, right? I mentioned a bunch of things, right? And yeah, so I view that it's extremely complicated, first of all, because what you mentioned is correct from a standpoint of a risk of stunting your growth, causing nutrient deficiencies, even like fostering disordered habits, because you know people who have these competitive lives may also have peers and friends who are also in school, and it may become a fad. They may become popular, and then there's that issue. And then let's say they don't have anything going for them, so even adults aren't swayed and they know it's a bad thing. You have those cases, right? But
Mm.
at the same time, what happens when you have a case where you have someone going to be cast in Hollywood and
No.
all their peers are looking at this and they become popular and every girl and guy starts doing that? What do? Right? As an adult, as someone who at your age, what do? Right?
Yeah, I mean, I
So,
feel because so many parents are just out of like
but I
com
don't want to call it dumb because that's where we get in trouble. That is
no,
that is the worst thing we could do, which is to say that there's no value in the restrictive dieting. Of course, there's value. Hollywood, and the other one is figure skating. That's tremendous value. Who am I to say that that's not valuable, right?
I completely agree.
Right.
But
We are. Do you know the worst part of it is if you call it dumb. Well, and I'm actually glad you did that because if you do that, then welcome to 2024. This is why we are where we are, is that then the children will not tell you, right? The fifth and sixth graders, not really children anymore, but they're these young adolescents are just not going to tell you and they're going to hide. They're going to still do it. They'll after they eat, they'll put their finger in their mouth and their throat and they'll vomit it all out because they know better, right? Because they tried to talk to you, but you wouldn't listen and you'd call it dumb,
exactly.
right? There might even be like the belt or the chair or the whack on the head, right? So, but it's not just there. It's not just physical. It could be even public shaming, right? So do you know public shaming? You know what that is?
It's where people laugh at you in public.
No, the adults bring it out like in front of all the children and say, like they try to give the shame, right?
Oh,
And fear of bringing shame to your family and your community to motivate a conformational change to the young adult, right? So in one context, it was popularity and everybody's doing it, and that's hard to counter. But the other side is that it's not popular and you shame them into non-existence, like you snuff it out by shaming them, you know.
I think that wouldn't work either. It just like just putting them in, it's just adding a layer to the deeper problem. Just
So right, so but public shaming in the school, right, calling them out for their mistake in front of the classroom and in the entire public assembly, this is the example that we want to discourage you as students from following this person and then publicly shame them. Do you know that that's practiced even in some societies encouraged? as a way to, um, like, for example, preventing littering or vandalism. You shame them publicly. And then they wear a sign on them walking around while they clean up the public spaces. And then they wear a sign in school and then everybody looks at them, right? Do you know what that would do?
What
Yeah.
what would it?
Well, well, it was actually in history, in the Western culture, there used to be like dunce caps, scarlet letters, right? That's emphasizing, these offenders needed to be publicly humiliated, right? So why did they do that, or why is it done? Because it's really very effective. It's fast. Now, long term, is it effective? Then no, because then the person might commit suicide. They might have a certain like they lose their own confidence, right? The damage is long term.
Because I feel like, especially like not for those one-off cases where it's ballerina, Hollywood, that the majority of kids just don't
Hmm.
eat to look better. They think that not eating is going to make me look better. I'm gonna look thinner. I'm going to just be better looking. Have
Well,
a.
the whole concept of being better, that whole concept, you broaden it, right,
I think,
is a problem.
yeah, but like I feel like if you just take the gist of it, it's to look good. But I feel like what they don't understand is that by not eating, they're actually going to look worse
But
because
now you're talking down to them as potentially, right? Calling it dumb, or how do you do that?
no, no,
Like
no.
how,
I
right?
just
How do you?
tell them that if they're not eating, they're not going to grow taller. They're not going to have their developed body, which in turn is just going to make them look worse. And it's just negative. It defeats the purpose of why they're doing it in the first place. So I feel like
Okay.
from that perspective,
So how do you do it though? How do you tell them this without it backfiring?
I mean, I think you just tell them. I think you just show them that.
Just tell them.
Yeah, just tell them you're going through puberty. When you were a kid, there's two main stages of growth. When they're a kid, you grew insanely well because you slept a lot and you drank a lot of milk.
Mhm.
Think now, you're not gonna grow taller.
So who's going to tell them this? Is it the nurse, school nurse? Is it the father? Oh, definitely the father. No, oh no, we should have the mother tell them. Who should tell them this?
Boxer path.
Box the path.
Yeah.
Tell them, or is it to like not tell them, but they're listeners, and we don't need to know who they are, so they're protecting their privacy, and we get the word out. That's different.
I think that's the beauty of this podcast. Like we're getting the word out.
Mhm.
There's so many.
That's good. That's good. That's important, right? In the sense that we're not here to um to enforce. This is not an enforcement. This is not a public shaming. And most importantly, yes, it does affect restrictive dieting does affect growth, and it has risks of stunting, and it causes nutritional deficiencies. Actually, by the time you're like 50 plus, you're going to have sarcopenia, which is like the muscles are not responding properly, and then you could have risk of falls and everything. So yes, there's absolute long-term consequences for restrictive dieting for children, fifth and sixth graders, as even adults. Like, why do adults do it then? And so is there a problem with adults doing it? And there absolutely is, especially when you look at the data sets around sarcopenia.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
even in North Korea and South Korea, right? Apparently, the height
Mhm.
between North and South Korean children is about 2 to 3 inches for boys,
Mhm.
just for girls.
So you know what sarcopenia is, though?
No, I don't.
All right. It is so definitely it's been there's a lot of research showing that when you apply restrictive dieting, you
Uh-huh.
could trigger these things. But sarcopenia is a condition that causes a gradual loss of your muscle mass, your muscle strength, and your muscle function. So it's a disease that commonly affects elderly and people who don't move around very much. So you end up getting weakness, you have loss of energy, balance problems, and so you get falls as you get older. So and then you have reduction in your nerve cells that signal the brain to the muscles even.
Mm-hmm.
It can cause many things. And then if your hormones aren't there, if your growth hormones aren't there, these things can also trigger sarcopenia later in life. So restrictive dieting absolutely is a major trigger.
It is. It is.
All right. All right. So then what happens is um it's the body image as well as the health and things like that have to come from a supportive standpoint, right? Rather than a criticism type standpoint, right? Um,
I think it has to come from a common sense standpoint, because it's just like
yeah.
slapping. Like you can only cut a diamond with a diamond. Have you heard that saying?
Yeah. So, the reason I brought up, there are a lot of professions out there
Uh-huh.
that have their style, their rules, and if you can't play, then you're out, right? And so we don't want to create a circumstance, whether it's academic or others, where we do any public shaming. We end up doing it. The world needs more encouragement, and we're still at loss, right, as to why
Hmm.
some people, and when they're laughed at, or if they get a C minus. Let's put it this way: they get a C minus. That it's actually positive for them, and others when they get a C minus, it's destructive. Right? It's not one set of standards for all. Some people getting a C minus is an awakening. It's such a huge awakening that they then learn that in life, if they chomp off little bits and pieces, they work at it. And then even the kids who get the A's, when they run into physics, they start or chemistry, they start watching YouTube videos of people doing problems, only to realize until you do the problem yourself, you actually don't really know how to do the problem. You kind of think you do, but then when you run into it, you don't really understand. So same thing with dieting and exercise is just as much as dieting could cause problems of restrictive dieting at a certain age, exercise in the wrong way could also lead to injuries. And injuries compound. You never 100% heal from your injuries. You only get up to 70%, it doesn't hurt anymore. So then it doesn't hurt anymore, but you're only 70%. So what's 70 times 70? Oh, it's only 49%. So now you're going to have more like a recurring injury in football and other things in sports that leads to it. But that's a physical injury. What about a recurring psychological injury? Right? Constantly trying to fit in or be popular or to get somewhere, and then using something as a cost, right? For example, all right, I want good grades, but I cheat. Well, is that good? No, there's a consequence, both if you're caught versus if you're not caught, there are still consequences. So with dieting, that's
Hmm.
just one of the subsets, but really it is trying to fit into something and then working at it. Part of that is encouraged by society. It's supported by society. Oh, the injuries, that's normal. Because you're now going to be a varsity football player, right? That's really, really important. And in fact, yesterday, I was at an event. It was the University of Pennsylvania against Harvard on the football game, and so we were invited. We were there, and which side should I sit on? Because I'm on both sides, right?
Which side did you sit on?
Well, I was at Penn, so I sat on the Penn side, but they gave us things that these little medallions that you wear, the pins you wear, saying beat Harvard, beat Harvard. So the whole game, Penn was ahead. And then I have little kids, so I had to leave. So I left in fourth quarter, and Penn was ahead. But But then when I looked up the score again, and I even talked about this, is if Penn lost, it would be a huge embarrassment because everyone was wearing those beat Harvard pins. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, at the end point, Harvard won. So, it's just, it doesn't have to be a competition. It doesn't have, but it takes a lot and where to start. And perhaps if you chose a ballerina school that was more holistic, or a wrestling coach that was more holistic, if you could choose, then you avoid some of these things. But imagine if you were trying to do allergy restrictions, but you went to the US military, right? So you might be laughed at and called a lady, even though you're a male, for having this kind of view, right? Society sometimes beats us up, and it's hard for the parents, for the child, and other times, if you don't follow the peer pressure, you might as well, not go to school. Sometimes it's that bad, and there's so many iterations of this that really the answer is that there is no solution but to talk about it, right? And hopefully by raising the awareness around all of us,
Mm.
that people start saying, well, public shaming isn't good. There is the consequence um, of of affecting and stunting growth, and also leading to long-term health issues. There's even, with sarcopenia, when I mentioned the definition, some people even think that dye-induced weight loss are 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 compromised by somehow the weight loss associating loss of lean body mass, and then that increases the risk of sarcopenia. But the answer is we really don't know. We just know that we put ourselves through the ringer. A lot
Mhm.
of tension, a lot of stress. Not everybody can be good at physics, becomes the thinking, when everybody can be good at physics if we made sure that, oh, you just need a little bit more help.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you need 10 more hours than that person.
And
Yeah,
yeah, and
yes.
that comes from one, loving yourself, and
And being loved.
no, loving yourself. You have to love yourself.
Yes.
And
But you have to also be loved.
well, I feel like
Who's
you.
doing the loving?
I mean, I feel like you can't. I feel like you have to love yourself. Like there's two people. Like each person is one what they want to do and one who they actually are. Right.
Remember, we're speaking to the coaches out there. This show, Box the Path, is for coaches, not for fifth and sixth graders, right? And so a coach calls the fifth and sixth grader, you wimp, you suck, you're terrible, get off my team.
Yeah.
Sit on that bench. You're going to be the bench warmer. What are you going to do? Tough guy. So yeah, think about that, right? So why I put it in that context is in
Uh-huh.
order to move the coaches, right? It's not to shame them either, right? It is really putting it into discussion is love yourself. I mean, I think that when you start off, you got to be loved first, loved, right? You have to feel that love.
But what have that love to be given to you? Like, what's the solution if no one's there to love you?
well, it's this discussion is what do you mean no one's there to love you? God loves you. Jesus loves you, right? We love them because why are we doing this? Because, we must feel a love for the fifth and sixth graders, right?
No one's.
So you have to feel that love first,
Uh-huh.
right?
Hmm.
And then you got to not try to not love those coaches that are aggressive. And we have to help them see that there's that consequence. Um, and then there's also, remember, maybe the coaches are running into peer pressure because they might be laughed at by other coaches, right? Imagine all the tough guy coaches that come together, and then wow, you're no longer a tough guy, right? Yeah,
Exactly.
right. So we human beings do it to ourselves,
Uh-huh.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, when I was going for my first job interview, I would try to get a new suit. What if you didn't? What if you just went in your jeans or something? Well, back then, it would have been terrible. You would have gone, so you get the suit, right?
Uh-huh.
You can't afford the suit, but you get the suit. And some people go to the extreme of getting the brand suit, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. Actually, it should work the other way around. If you want to make the interviewer feel like you're very studious, you get the cheapest suit out there, you know,
And then
and shorten the sleeves a little bit so it looks like you don't, but be very bright, and then you look like the geek and nerd look, right, with thick plastic glasses or something, right, frames. Yeah,
uh-huh.
yeah, we brand so many things. Nike even says just do it. Well, should we just do it on bulimia and anorexia, or should we just do it on coaching? And we just, there, we need to think and think again. Think outside the box, think in the box, think of consequences, but then not judge, because it is in the judgment that causes the animosity, the anger, the public shaming. It is in looking at everything.
I
Yeah.
s- Yeah.
Mm. It's hard. It's really hard. It's very hard. It's easier to shame. It's easier to I don't know, switch schools, right? For example. It's harder
Well, I mean,
to
I'm
endure.
harder. I would just say it requires you to almost give up a part of yourself, you know? It's to say that I was wrong, that here's what I did wrong, and here's how I can better myself. I think it's really just saying I was wrong, you know? Because it's like,
Like artificial light, right? So artificial light has
uh-huh.
been shown to at nighttime has been shown to induce 14%. So every 100 people, 14 individuals will get breast cancer. Um, with artificial light at nighttime. Yeah, so let's say an LED light, a fluorescent light, some kind of artificial light. You're studying, you're doing your homework, and it's nighttime. 14 out of every 100 people will, in the studies have shown that artificial light and breast cancer. Well, you can look that up actually. Artificial light and breast cancer, and it says artificial light at night, so it's called ALAN, has been linked to an increased risk of cancers in the body sites such as the breast and in the rectum, the colorectum. Um, and this is an NIH published research. So should we not do homework at night? This was 2016, so it's not so many people don't know about this unless they know about these things. So they studied this, and yeah, what are we doing? Yeah.
What are we doing about it?
I'm not doing anything about it. I mean, you're not going to do your homework, right? In schools.
Yeah.
So the artificial light at night, look up ALAN. Artificial light at night
Alan.
is correlated to all forms of cancer, actually, lung, breast, colorectal, and prostate. Yeah. And it says in the conclusion of the work is that immediate measures should be taken to limit artificial light at night in the main cities around the world, but also inside of the houses. Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, this is from the Faculty of Medicine, right? So they're doing this, and they're finding these things. Are you going to restrict doing homework? Do the teachers know this? I mean, who's doing anything about this? Yeah,
I think, I mean, I feel like this might not be as big as a problem as it might be.
cancer. Cancer is a big problem, right? It's like,
Um,
yeah, but we can only through our knowledge change. We can't go and do um, what do we where do we go from here now? If this ended right in 2016, like I mentioned, that paper, it
yeah.
was largely suppressed, but by 2021 it makes it in the British Journal of Cancer. So British Journal of Cancer is one of the top journals out there. It then made into Nature. It's in nature.com, so it's the top thing. And so it says, despite experimental and mechanistic data suggesting circadian rhythm disruptions role in cancer, mixed findings of artificial light at night and cancer risk, right? are extremely difficult to expose and to assess now. But they recognize it now. So yeah, but what about homework? And have you done homework all night long before? Stayed up
Uh,
all night?
I did.
Yeah, didn't that stunt your growth or affect you? Maybe shaved off a few inches. I mean, but cancer is a whole nother thing. So it is, who's looking at this information? Who's doing anything about it? Who's even talking about this?
Nobody.
Nobody. That's right. But it's published. It's public information, all this. So yes, that's what Box the Path really is. There is no solution to educating all the teachers and restricting them and other things, but you just have to know about the data. Now, the other thing is, goodness, 86%, right? Only 14% get it, but 86% are fine. So does that mean that we should just ignore this information? We should tell it as it is, right? So we should provide all the facts. Now,
Right.
blue light exposure has been known and shown to suppress circadian rhythm and melatonin levels. And then largely later on in life, these individuals end up having other issues.
Mhm.
Right. Depression, obesity. So there you go, more dining, insomnia, sleep latency, right? And then many of these endpoints, right? But who's
Mhm.
doing anything? It starts at fifth and sixth grade, which is why I think the more we know, the more we just have to talk about it openly, not go rattle around saying we have the solution, because nobody has the solution. It's going to take major change, especially with the advent of AI. In fact, I saw a robot walking on campus when I was at Penn yesterday.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was learning to walk. And these students, I mean, it's only 2024, but in 4 years, yeah.
I think it's gonna be full of robo dogs. I even saw a video where the Secret
Mhm.
Service deployed a robot dog to uh walk around Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence.
Yeah, what happens if robots get cancer, right?
Yeah.
They don't get cancer, they might get viruses, right? And so then they act funny and then there's defects. I mean, there is so much that we need to just talk about. And there's no perfect model. They need to be knowledgeable and they have to know
Well, how
what they're getting into.
how serious do you think these problems are? Like we talked about the light, but do you really think it's that important?
Well, here's the problem is that if you don't think something's important, then maybe the other thing's not important either. And then pretty soon nothing's important. We should just not talk about it. Talking about it actually is really important.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then people need to make their own decisions, right? About what it is. In fact, if you were to date someone, would you ask them, hey, did you ever pull all-nighters? Have you been exposed to artificial light at night? We're not going on a date because then that could lead to further things. And I really don't want to be dating someone who might have cancer in the future. I mean, that takes it all the way to the extreme, right? And these issues, right, of what is good or bad, we need to, what's bad is we haven't been talking about it, right? And then sometimes, you know what's underneath our skin, like deep inside, is ugly. When you go down to the skeleton, no skeleton looks good outside of Halloween. So you're basically going to look at someone and say, wow, your nose, the cartilage is gone. Or your body, it's just not, we are such visual creatures that we judge, right? And when you go out of that path and you trigger certain things, then you don't think cancer patients are judged? They're judged by their insurance, probably by the company that hires them or not. I mean, the list goes on, that when you take care of yourself and something goes wrong versus you didn't take care of yourself and something goes wrong. And some people, they vape and they smoke and nothing went wrong. And others, they tried it once and everything goes wrong. So it's tough, right? For what we're going to go through as fifth and sixth graders and adults and people in society, you've got to use everything you got to deal with what's coming and what's already here now. But my answer is you have everything you need through Box to Path. You
And I
have everything. We are
way
here to give them everything they need, which is the conversation.
exactly.
Hmm.
I feel like the way the world is changing because like what 4 years ago they were talking about transgender and now everything's changing just like that. That I feel like this there's just so many crazy ideas and
There are consequences to everything. Why that's another thing that happened at Penn is there was no men's room and no women's room. We were all using the same bathroom.
really,
So yeah, so it was an all gender bathroom. So now instead of having five urinals and five toilets for men, that's 10. Like not every, men can, if you don't use the toilet, you can stand and use the urinal. But now if you get rid of all that, you've got 10 slots that are gone. Women, let's say they had four slots. Well, now those four slots need to be shared with the other 10 men that are going in there. So everything's delayed.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so much chaos in this world and this craziness
It
that
wasn't even washed in as frequently because, right, the use per time is just going to increase. Yeah.
yeah. And I feel like it's just always going to keep on
And
changing.
is it transgender or do we need to use the, we need to conserve water? I mean, it's the presentation is worth looking into because, we have to think about our presentation, right? And
Yeah.
so we have to be politically correct in our presentation. Oh, so now we're not present there. We want to create a place where it's a safe place to discuss and to become knowledgeable about. Imagine doing something and just not knowing the consequences. That's where it becomes a problem. But if you know the consequences and then you still do it, then that's a choice. And we're not here to say you can't have that choice. That's what we need to elevate ourselves to is that once you have all the knowledge, the Allen, the artificial light at night, and then you look at the risk of cancer, you read that paper and you read all the papers that come to it and then all the publication and said, who's funding this? And why didn't they fund it earlier? It's almost as bad as baby powder. Sounds great, baby powder, but that's talc. And the talc contained asbestos, which led to night sweats and other kinds of defects. Um, but did you have a choice when you're using baby powder when you were a baby?
No, you didn't.
Yeah, no. But how about when you're an adult and you're still using it? You have a choice, but you didn't know because there's no channel that talks about talc containing asbestos.
And then by the
Huh.
time you hear about it, it's too late. For example, Johnson Johnson, the big scandal that came out, it's way too late. How many babies how degraded by the time it came out?
If you're selling baby powder, would you fund the research to show that there are safety issues? No, you're not going to do that.
Of course not.
Right.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
why talking about it is so important.
You took chemistry? The fluorine is one of the strongest covalent bonds out there. And we had Teflon and that was fluorinated coatings for frying pans and carpets so that they don't, you could spill things in your car or your carpet in your house. It wouldn't be, but then you use the vacuum cleaner and you pull up that stuff and now you might have PFAS in the air or in your water. And then what about your tent or your rain gear? Your raincoat, wind coat. Those contain they don't all polymerize, so you have that leaching out. I mean, the list goes on and on. The point is that until you have a channel, a place to talk about, did you know, as a fifth grader, if you knew these things, you could change your whole life.
You would change it.
Oh, absolutely. Because, well, not everybody will change it, but if you don't have the right to know, you have the right to know. And then your parents have the right to know what happens. I mean, public shaming in Japan is very popular. Public shaming in China is very popular. But as social media came about and the public shaming went to extremes, even people who are rooted in that are second guessing. So they're realizing that public shaming might not be an ideal, but those popularities, like ballet, gymnastics, figure skating, those have been around for so long, and the coaches have been trained in a certain mindset for so long that we're going to need a lot of everything we got. And that's what I'm saying. Box the Path is everything you need, because you're going to need everything to go and counter this as you move forward into
Uh,
2044.
like a tool shop. It's like a Home Depot. You pick what you need. Pick what you need to speed
I
up.
don't even want to use the word Home Depot because, Home Depot, because I'm in real estate and everything, you can't buy any, like if you have a flat roof, you can't buy any of those things at Home Depot. Home Depot is for retail homeowner customers, right? If you need anything like serious, that's not at Home Depot. Where do
Oh,
you buy this? No, you have to hire a roofer because only they can buy this. There's no
uh,
store. Now, I learned the hard way because I had to go through. Oh, really? The world is this way? You mean to tell me I'm never going to see physics again unless was a science major and I studied more physics in college? And yeah, if you studied physics in high school, you got a taste of it, and that was it. You're not if you and you go into business or you go into economics, you're not going to see physics again.
no, you're not.
You're going to history or art. You're never going to see history again. Physics again. But then, like, what if I went into creative writing? I didn't know how to do creative writing beyond scientific writing until at Harvard I took a class that taught me like why the movie Jaws doesn't say this is about sharks. I mean, do you mean there's a science around how to put a title together? Jaws? Wow. Or the bridges of Madison County meant something about romance. You don't put love and romance. You don't become so explicit in your title, right? And think about Harry Potter. That's great. I don't know what that says or what it means, but you're building that. Also, even people in science need to also know the other thing. It's knowing a little bit of everything, a little bit more of something every day. That is going to transform a fifth grader and sixth grader and their parents and their grandparents. And I don't know of any place you can do that. That's why we're creating this. I mean, you learned about dunce caps and scarlet letters today, right? And
Yeah,
and why the West decided, even though they were Puritans, which did what they did, they decided to get rid of the public shaming largely, right? But now you've got and public shaming. The other problem is it leads to bullying, right? It leads to this long term, you know, dark place where you lose all your confidence.
and I really, really think we need an episode on bullying because one, we're gonna give the insights like when we have an episode. We're gonna give real insights, not some BS things, whatever counselor says, ignore, stop. No,
You
yeah, give
you attacked a counselor. We can't be attacking anybody. They're there because you don't they need help too,
and
So yeah, no attacking.
they feel very because
It's
one,
hard. I know that as your age, you should attack them because you're angry, you're upset.
yeah,
But that only exacerbates the issue. We have a long way to go.
nobody is sitting and talking about bullying. When I was bullied, I searched up on YouTube how to deal with it, and literally nothing. It,
Professor YouTube is a problem. Out of YouTube comes multiple answers. Like you ask a question, there's like 50 different solutions,
yeah,
right?
some punch the guy, bring a knife. Other people say stop, ignore. You don't know what works.
No. If you run into bullying, it's a tough problem.
Yeah, and I feel
Yeah.
like next episode it has to be about bullying.
Okay. Sure. Fine.
Yeah, um I think that was a good.
Well, was bullying Harvard as well by saying beat Harvard. I
Yeah,
instantly felt it because I love both places, right? So
yeah,
and my kids saw it too, and they said, "What are we going to do?" I said, "Sit on the pen side. It's not the sun isn't in your eyes."
yeah.
Yeah, the pen had the shaded side.
Uh-huh. I see.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, some people and where the history came about, right, is that they feel that's a competitive competition is healthy. It's good. Some of it's good. Is it right? Is it good for everybody? Is it useful? I certainly worked very hard because I was exposed to this. But then it takes a whole nother level of thinking is you've got to win so you can change the system around you, at least around you, right? So what happens with public shaming that is such a huge problem other than bullying, other than emotional, psychological harm, right? It's one, losing your perspective, like totally now. Like now it's all about the shaming. And then the erosion of trust. What can be nothing worse is an adult going to a teenager and then telling them they know everything. If you knew everything, then and you could control everything, why is the peer pressure, right? And then once you erode that trust, though, now you don't have a chance to have constructive lessons anymore because it goes into the category of I can't hear what you're saying anymore, right? And then misjudging them. I mean, they're the ones having to go through the peer pressure every day. So, so only through knowledge of educating the masses really very quickly about, the stunted growth and other things. I mean, think about every time something bad happens to somebody, and you're dared by someone else, it's really because they weren't thinking. If only you could change them too, right? It's got to become really loud. Make a song, make a video, like a mobile game or something, where the person does, dieting, and then they use bulimia and anorexia, and they lose health points. Something where the more you play stuff like that, the more the message comes across, right?
It
Whatever
it
it is, it's got to be taught to the masses.
it does. It does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Okay,
I
great
think
conversation.
yeah, great conversation.
All right, we end here.
Yeah, I think that's
Okay.
great. Thank you so much for
Stopping here. You're welcome. Right.
yeah.
Good night.
Good night.